Fierst, and I am the founder of Lil Pantry of Mount Vernon. And I'm so glad to be here talking to you. I have never been asked to speak about this story, not once. I ran the Lil Pantry here in Knox County for 3 years, and not one person from the community administration or anyone else in the food insecurity nonprofit sector ever once came and spoke to me about what I was doing. Not once. So I am really excited to be here and to tell you the story and to help you understand why I started it and why I'm restarting it. So I want to take you back to 2020 when we were in the middle of the COVID pandemic. My husband and I work from home. I own a technology company that I started when I was 20. I'm 56. So I have had my business for over 35 years. I don't do business locally. I work with 30% of the Fortune 500 and am a successful technology business owner. I happen to live in Knox County, Ohio. I was not involved in the community, and I purposely did not involve myself in the community. My family goes back to the early 1800s in this community. That's another story. My grandfather, Paul Cochran, was the sheriff of Knox County from 1952 to 1964. My dad grew up in the Knox County jail because his dad was the sheriff. In those days, they lived there, and the sheriff's wife made the meals. And my dad was learning too much from prisoners. So they sent him to boarding school in Florida, and he never came back to Knox County. And so I grew up in the Detroit, Flint, Michigan area, because that's where my dad and mom landed. And so I came back to Knox County. I had lots of family here, and my roots are technically here. I came back with my husband and my 2 boys that are in the back there. That's my husband, Drew, and those are my 2 twin boys, Jacob and Lucas, who are 17 now. And we moved back to Knox County in 2008. So I had been here a number of years when the pandemic hit, and we were at that point not traveling for business very much. My husband actually works for me. That's how we met. I hired him in 1999, ignored him for 5 years. And then one Friday, we both walked out of our offices at the same time, and he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "What are you doing?" And we went to get pizza together, and we were married 3 months later. So you just have to hire your future spouse. It works out better that way. So that's Drew and my 2 boys, and I'll talk about Dorothy in a few minutes, who is standing in the back there. So my husband and I were, like many people, working out of our home during the pandemic. We work out of our home anyway, so it really wasn't a big difference for us. And one day, during the day, I got a knock on my front door, and nobody knocks on our front door. So I thought, it's either Jehovah's Witnesses or Amazon. Those are the only 2 people who ever knock on my front door. So I went prepared to talk to one or the other, and there were 2 little girls standing there, 7 and 9. And one of them had a little tray with bracelets, just like this. And they're made out of rubber bands. And she said, "We're selling bracelets as a school fundraiser. They're $2 each. Will you help us raise money?" I knew that no school sells rubber band bracelets. But I bought one for $2. And then a couple days later, they were on my porch again, selling these bracelets for their fundraiser. I bought a couple of bracelets. If any of you need any rubber band bracelets, I have a whole bunch of rubber band bracelets. So then by the time I think Drew was the 3rd or 4th time they showed up at our door, I finally said to Drew, "Something's going on here, and I need to figure it out." And so I said to them, "Girls, tell me what's going on. I know this isn't a school fundraiser. What are you doing with this money? And they said, we're hungry. We need food. And I said, so when I give you this money, where are you getting the food? And they said, we go down to the dollar store. And so I said to Drew, I'm going to follow them to verify this story. I want to kind of know what's going on. So I watched them, and I watched them go around to different neighbors. I could tell they were getting some money from some folks, and I followed them. I followed them all the way to the dollar store. I followed them back to their home. I kind of quantified what was going on. Wanted to make sure that they weren't like living in the woods or something, you know. And essentially, what was happening was they weren't going to school because of the pandemic. So they weren't getting the breakfast and the lunch that they were used to getting, and there was no food at home. I tossed and turned for nights on end. And I, like many of you, had been watching the news. I knew that we were in a food crisis, but I didn't really know what to do about it. I had given to some organizations, but this was close to home. This was in my neighborhood. And if any of you know where Syker Road is in Mount Vernon, it is not a high dollar area of Mount Vernon. I live in a fairly poor neighborhood. All of the kids who go to Pleasant Street are on the free breakfast and lunch plan at the school. That school provides that to everyone. And so I was tossing and turning, and I had an idea. If you can see this old dresser, this is an heirloom dresser that my mother had passed down to me from my great-grandmother, and it had been sitting in my garage for a long time, and I didn't know what to do with it. And I said to Drew, here's what I want to do. I want to take that old dresser and turn it into some sort of little food pantry, and then those girls can just get food there, and we'll just fill it with food. And, you know, if anybody, all the other kids in the neighborhood come, great, and we'll just fill it with food. I have a little construction master over there, so he said, oh, I love it. I'll do it. So I know it's difficult to see, but he started, I'm just going to flip through a couple of the screens so you can see. He started taking the drawers apart. He started coming up with a concept. And eventually, this is what we had. So I don't know how much you can see it, but the top was constructed by my husband and the bottom is that dresser. And I painted it, and we decided to call it Lil Pantry. And the idea was that we were going to feed these two little girls and maybe some other neighborhood kids. We went out, we filled it with things that 7 and 9-year-olds would like. Macaroni and cheese, SpaghettiOs, applesauce cups. It wasn't necessarily an adult menu. It was all geared towards kids. And when we placed it out in front of our house, you can see how little it is. And it was up in our yard. No walkway or anything. Had no idea if it would withstand storms. It was just something we did for the kids. And they started to come. And they stopped selling me their rubber band bracelets. And they started getting food. And other kids started getting food. And I was watching really carefully. And one of the things that was most interesting, my bedroom is this window right up here. And when we looked out, we could see underneath this, but we couldn't tell who was standing there. And one night at 2 a.m., I saw little bare feet under there, like this. And it was probably, what, 6-year-old? 5, 6, getting food from the pantry. I've never cried so much in my entire life as I did the first few weeks that that pantry was in front of my house. And I would go out and fill it, keep it filled. And then I remember the first time that an adult was standing there. I called Drew, I said, an adult is at the pantry. And he said, wow, okay, well, I mean, right? Whoever. And then I remember the first time I went out to the pantry and there was food there that I hadn't put there. I came running into the house, Drew, somebody put food in this. And he came running out and we stood there. And I was like, I don't know who did this or why they did this. It never even occurred to me that somebody might help. But food started to show up. And more people started to show up. And it became this ongoing, important, day in, day out exchange of donations and taking. Donations and taking. And every time we would have no food, someone would donate it. The timing was impeccable. It was miraculous, really. And I remember the first time the food actually landed on the porch, where somebody had so many donations that it couldn't even fit in my little pantry, so they just put it on my porch. Then I started a Facebook page. Then, this pantry was not big enough for the need. So I asked my husband if he could build wings off the side of it. We added this sign on the side that said, take what you need, give if you can. And we put a little slot up in the middle. And people started to donate. Not in big amounts. What I realized was a lot of the people who were taking were giving what they could. So there'd be 71 cents. You know that someone did not drive to my pantry to donate 71 cents. Someone stood there and took some things they needed and gave all that they had. I would get some crazy notes in that slot too. Here's one. I need a vacation and water, please. Kill all the demons. A little scary. But then I would get this. I appreciate. Thank you for what you do for others. Your kindness is appreciated. I have a whole folder of things that people left. A napkin. Just to say thank you for everything. Many homeless people do not have room in their bags for all of the containers. I learned that very quickly. They would stand at the pantry, take the food out of the cereal box, leave the box, and take the bag portion. Or take the Jell-O out of the Jell-O thing, put it in their bag, and leave me a note on the Jell-O container. Thank you for all your kindness. And I have a lot here. So I said, we're expanding. Get me those wings. And he went in and he built them. And this is what the second round looked like. And so we have 2 wings off the side. And I was getting more donations, but more people were needing the pantry. So I want to introduce Dorothy Adkins. Dorothy, why don't you just walk up here for a minute? Dorothy was hired to be my boys' nanny when they were 18 months old. She's been with my family as an employee since the boys were 18 months old, and they're 17 now. And I said to Dorothy, the boys don't need you as much during the day, but I do. I need you to help me fill that pantry. And so from 8 to 5, while I was working, Dorothy would fill the pantry. And I would say initially we filled it twice a day, probably. 2 times a day. By the time we had gone 3 years, I'm jumping way ahead, we were filling the pantry between 20 and 30, sometimes up to 50 times a day. And we know every person who came to that pantry because we have the whole thing under surveillance. It's in my yard. It's my porch. It's my property. It's my employee and my family that goes out there and fills it. So I know everything that goes on at that pantry. I have it all on video, and I got to know the people. We have a huge deaf community in Knox County. We ended up having a lot of the deaf community at the pantry. We have a huge disability community that is not making it each month. Thanks. I'm going to let you ask questions of Dorothy later. I just wanted you to see her face. I had a man who came, an elderly gentleman, who would come to the pantry every day. What was it? He got a sleeve of crackers and a can of sardines, correct? Yeah. Every single day for his lunch. And one time, I don't remember if it was you, Dorothy, or me that talked to him for the first time when he was out there. And sometimes we'd be filling the pantry while people would come, and we got a chance to talk to him. And he just said, "This is my favorite meal. It's been my favorite meal my whole life. The first time I saw that you had sardines here, I cried." And he said, "I wasn't eating lunch. I was only eating Meals on Wheels was bringing him one meal, and he would sometimes be able to eat breakfast. So he started coming down. I don't know where he was coming from. I never, I don't follow people around. I don't know where he was coming from or how far he walked, but he would come almost every day and take one can of sardines and one sleeve of crackers for his lunch, and he was elated. Not only did we have a lot of people with disabilities and a lot of elderly folks, but again, lots of children. And one of the interesting things about food resources is that they almost always gear towards adults, and you have to sign up, you have to fill out paperwork, you have to show ID, and it's only at designated times. So once a month, or the first Tuesday, the second Saturday, the third Wednesday, from 4 to 5 only, from 11 to 2. What 7-year-old has access to any of that? None. And so one of the things that was so fascinating about this is how many kids just by themselves came to the pantry. And one story in particular I want to share with you. The little boy pulled up on his bicycle, and we watched him. He had tape, and he taped as much food as he could to every square inch of that bicycle. He would test it to see if it could still go, and if it could still go, he would take more on it. He had cans of food all around the wheels, all along the handlebars, and we're watching him. We're all at the window watching him saying, "I don't know, it's going to be interesting. I don't know if he's going to make it." He did. He pedaled off to who knows where. That's not an adult. He doesn't have any paperwork. He has no proof of anything. He just needed food. So, what happened was, this was fine for a while. This pantry was fine for a while. But I eventually realized that it was not serving the people with disabilities. They were in wheelchairs and they could not get up to that pantry, so we added this. We made it accessible. And I was one of the first 100 people in the country ever to be certified in the Americans with Disabilities Act when I was 20 years old. That law passed in 1990, and I immediately got certified and helped businesses make their spaces accessible. I knew accessibility. So I told Drew, here's what we got to do, and I gave him all the specs, and he built it out, and now it is set up so that people in a wheelchair could come down the sidewalk, turn in, and utilize the pantry. So that was our next move. Here is some flowers that somebody picked out of my own yard and left for me as a gift. When I walked out at 7 a.m. to fill the pantry, they were awaiting me, and I thought, those look familiar. I went to my garden and said, yep, those are my flowers. But somebody wanted me to know that they appreciated it, so they put my flowers in the donation slot. I said to my husband, we need a bigger and better pantry. Here is the pictures of him building the next iteration of the pantry. It's deeper, it's wider, it has bigger wings. There it is. Here's him uninstalling the first iteration and installing the second iteration. And the neighbors all helped because it was too heavy for him to lift by himself. And he added my wings to it, bigger and better. I love that the Christmas tree is in the background. This was Christmas, about 3 days before Christmas. And the pantry never closed. It was 24 hours a day. The problem with an unattended food pantry is that, and I can get you to specs down to the hour, if we went to Columbus for 6 hours and Dorothy wasn't available, and so nobody happened to be at the house, that pantry would suddenly have expired green beans, and that's it. If you leave a food pantry unattended, it cannot self-sustain. The things that people will donate and do are not acceptable, not to me. Any expired item that somebody donated went in the trash. Yes, we could sit and have a debate about the fact that much of the food is still good past the expiration, but I'm not debating that. It's my food pantry, and out of respect for the people who come there, I do not put expired food in that food pantry. If I won't feed it to my family, it doesn't go in that food pantry. And a bunch of green beans does a family no good. So the reason, if you wonder why we had to fill it 20 or 30 times a day, is because it wasn't acceptable to me to have peanut butter and no jelly. Or to have spaghetti noodles but no spaghetti sauce. So we made sure at all times there are meals there. A mother or a child can come up to that pantry and make a meal for their family. If you've ever looked at food boxes, I am thankful for all the places that get food boxes. But if you've ever looked at one and tried to think, what would I make out of this? It is not easy. It is a hodgepodge of odds and ends, much of which you can't easily make a meal out of, and certainly not after your second shift, and certainly not when you don't have spices or anything to make it taste better. So this was the final version, and I got a sign at the top for this one, and this was the final version. This pantry ran for 3 years, and it expanded and grew in so many ways, and I want to show you some pictures of people who gave. Here's a motorcycle club who showed up one day in a big motorcycle chain. Like, they had been gathering food, and then they had this drive-in, and they just drove in motorcycle after motorcycle after motorcycle and kept handing me boxes and boxes and boxes.
Wow.
And then a small Christian school here, the Christian Star Academy, I think it is called. Those little kids took paper bags, and you can't see it very well here, but they all decorated them. They decorated grocery bags for Christmas, and they brought them by hand to the pantry. They're all decorated, and they were filled. They'd been gathering supplies all fall, and they brought it at Christmas time. Carloads. And that place is tiny. I think they only have like 7 kids in the whole school. Young Miss Ohio's came, several of them. One was like 5, one was like 8, one was like 13. They have to do community service as part of winning their crown. And they would come, and they would, of course, want their picture taken, but they would give lots of food and donations. And again, I would go out, I'd be having a bad day, and somebody would leave me 2 twigs. Because that's what they could give. and it would fill my heart. We had our issues. One of the most ironic things is that the children who needed the pantry the most were middle school boys. They're the hungriest. They're growing. And they were my biggest problem as well. Oh, they weren't a problem when they were by themselves because they needed the food. Two of the ones that were the naughtiest lived down the street and around the corner, and they would come frequently for food, oftentimes multiple times a day. But if you got them with their friends, they would be naughty. So they would take a bag of flour and just put it everywhere. Or they would take things out of our yard, okay, and do things with it. They would take a watermelon that somebody might have left and break it everywhere. And of course I had it on video. I had it on surveillance. I knew who the problems were, but there weren't parents that could be involved. I did involve the police multiple times, had to. But for the most part, I didn't have problems. Everybody says to me, well, how did you keep people from taking more than they should? Didn't happen. And in fact, Dorothy came inside one day crying, I believe, because she was out there and she offered a little boy, I think he'd been coming home from the bus, he stopped to get some food on his way home, and he wanted a bar, a health bar. And she said, you can take 2, and he said, no, I want to leave it for the other kids who need it. And it happened over and over and over again. The only people who talk to me about problems were people who think people don't deserve things. They would come up on my porch and they would want to know, how are you regulating this? How are you keeping this from happening? How are you? We want to give, but we only want to give if we can assure that people aren't going to take more than they deserve. And I would say, I appreciate you so much, but exit, please. Walk down my stairs and get in your car, and someday, when you truly understand what I'm doing here, you're welcome to return and bring as many donations as you can.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Hey, it's like fraud and abuse, okay? I'm
Yes.
not here all the time.
Yes.
People thinking like, oh, you know.
Correct.
Okay, I have to say that, sorry.
Yes, and it just simply doesn't happen. That's not my experience. 3 years, 24 hours a day, I did not encounter that. There was one man in a very nice truck who was taking a lot from me, and we had him on video, and I waited until he returned, and I went out and I asked him, what's going on? Why are you taking all my food? And we had a brief and pointed discussion, and he never returned. He was taking things that he shouldn't have taken. 1 out of 3 years of going 24 hours a day, one person was taking advantage of the pantry. That's phenomenal. And so it just doesn't match my experience. I am not a social psychologist. I am not an expert in food insecurity. I don't keep track of all of the details. I didn't have time for that. All I knew was my little social experiment that was going on was useful and needed, and it made a difference. And I will bet you, if I had the resources and the statistics, I'll bet you petty crime went down in Knox County during those 3 years. Because nobody needs to break in and try to find change in cars when they have a pantry they can go to and get a meal. I learned that we have a lot of people in Knox County who are living in their cars. There was a mother and a daughter. The mother was about 65, her daughter was about 45, and they were living in their car and coming to the pantry for a meal a day. Every other day we would see them. Nice car, and the daughter had a job, but they just couldn't find housing. We have a housing problem in Knox County. So I learned a lot, but I can tell you this, we're going to lose $300 billion in SNAP benefits if this bill passes Congress. And we are going to see a bigger surge in need than I even saw when COVID was happening. What happened in late 2023 is that I decided to close the pantry. Biden was president, we had seen some shifts, I wasn't getting the donations, and even though people were coming to the pantry, the need wasn't as great, and my family was exhausted. I needed a break. And I had that middle school boy who was a problem for me, and the police had said there just isn't any more we can do. And I reached a day where I just said, I need a break, and we're shutting it down. And do you know what happened when I announced that? And I thought this was interesting. 2 different little girls showed up at my door with these. And I thought to myself, that came full circle. I started this for 2 little girls, and I ended it on 2 little girls. I didn't know these little girls. They just said, thank you for everything you did. And they had each drawn a picture, and they had said, my mommy wanted us to give these to you and say thank you for all the stuff that we got from you. Now, that was at the end of 2023. We took a break. I can't tell you how wonderful it was the next morning to get up and not have to walk out there and fill that pantry and just get a break. Because I'll tell you, it was day in, day out. When you're going out there 20 to 30, sometimes up to 50 times a day over a 24-hour period, because what would happen is if we would hear enough activity out there at 2 or 3 in the morning, I would get up and refill. Because I wanted anybody who came to that pantry to be able to shop. So there was no, we're gonna wait until 6 in the morning and fill it then. We filled it at 2 a.m. Now, about 3 months ago, I started, of course, as all of you, that's why we're here, started watching what was happening. And I said to my husband, we're gonna have to restart that pantry. I know we are. And I'm ready. I'm ready. I just don't know what the right time is. And about 6 weeks ago, I had Dorothy help me out. Come up here and help me out, because I don't remember whether you and I were talking. I want you all to understand how this all played out. Had I turned to you and said, I think I'm going to restart the pantry, or we just had a conversation about it at that point?
Yeah, you let me know that you were strongly considering.
And then those folks contacted me before the chiropractor thing happened, correct? The indivisible folks?
I believe so.
So your Janet is her name, reached out to me out of the blue. I don't know her. I didn't know her. Sent me an email and said, we're looking for an organization to support, and a lot of our members knew about the Lil Pantry. We're wondering if you would consider starting that up again, and we'd like to support you in that effort. And I said to Dorothy, I said, I got this email out of the blue. What? Wow. And she said, wow, that's interesting timing that you were thinking of starting up. And so I met with Janet. I said, I'll meet you. We'll talk about it, because I cannot do this alone. I know what it took. I know how much effort it took and how much food we had to buy. Even though people donated, they did not donate enough. And I had to buy a lot of food. And I said, I just know that the need's going to be even greater now. I'm going to have some organizations support. And we sat at a cafeteria in Gambier. We talked about it. And she said, I think I can garner you some support. And I said, all right, I will think about it and I will let you know. Now, I want to tell you another story. I go to a chiropractor in Fredericktown. And one of my biggest supporters when I had the Lil Pantry before was the woman who helps my chiropractor. She would randomly just put envelopes of cash in my purse when I was there and say, this is for the Lil Pantry. And I'm not talking about small amounts, 300, 400, 500, and she doesn't make much money, and she has an autistic son. And I would say, what? And she said, I grew up, the first time she told me this, I won't cry. She said, I grew up in Mount Vernon, in one of the apartments where the very poor people live. And she said, if I had had a pantry like this, where I could go there any time of day on my own, it would have changed my life. So I am committed to this. She probably gave me more personal money than anyone else, but here's what's interesting. I hadn't told anybody, except for my husband and Dorothy, that I was considering that until Janet came to me and talked to me. And I had a chiropractor appointment the next day. I went into the chiropractor, and this woman, who I've been seeing for 2 years with no pantry, slid an envelope to me. She said, I don't know why, but I just feel like I'm supposed to give this to you. And I was so confused. I said, what? Because she wouldn't be giving me money. I don't need money. She said, I don't know why. I said, but did someone talk to you? And she said, what are you talking? I said, I just decided I'm going to reopen the pantry. She went. I got back to the house. I said, Dorothy, I handed her an envelope, $300. I said, there's our seed money for the little pantry. She handed it to me. She didn't even know why. Look, it's going to be worse than it was during the pandemic. We're not there yet, but we're approaching it. I know it, you know it. I'm not asking you to necessarily give to my pantry. That's not why I'm here today. I am going to be restarting the pantry. My family's on board. Dorothy's on board. I'm on board. It's us for it. It's in my yard. My husband just priced out what it was going to take to build the next pantry because we gave that one away. Because somebody said they would start a pantry in their community, so I wanted it to be used. So we gave it away, so we're starting over. We're building our, third pantry, fourth iteration. Yeah, and he just priced it all out last night, $600 in materials to do what we need to do. And we're donating that. But point being, we're in it. We're scheduling it to start the day after Labor Day. It's going to take me that long to get it built and to come up with enough supplies to start over. I got my library back in my house for 2 years, but it's going again because it takes a whole room in my house to store everything that we have to store in order to run it. Are there other food pantries in Knox County? Absolutely. And I'm not competing. We have way worse problems than one more food pantry. Okay? This is just a different type of resource. This isn't fighting that. This is supplementing that. This is feeding a different crowd. It is meeting a different need, and it's just one more way of helping. So support something. It doesn't have to be me. But know that things are going to be bad. They were bad in the pandemic. They're going to be bad now. And I'm ready to do my part. I appreciate your time, and I will take any questions that you have. And I'm sure Dorothy and Drew, if you want to come up here, we'll answer any questions. If you want to know about logistics, if you want to know how we also, interestingly enough, if you came to the pantry, everything was in the same place every time. Why? Because when I go to Kroger, I don't have to wonder where milk is. And so I was also a stickler for when you fill that pantry, spaghetti sauce goes here, noodles go here, crackers go here, sardines go here, tuna goes here. And we had it all regimented. Out of respect for the people who came there on a regular basis, they knew where things were. They didn't have to stand there any longer than they needed to. We didn't take names, numbers, nothing. Thank you for your time. I'll answer any questions.